Hi, before we find out what happens next, make sure to give us a like and subscribe to the channel. It takes a second and really help us grow. Out to the story.
The office had its own kind of silence after 8 p.m., not the clean stillness of absence, but the messy quiet of exhaustion. The hum of the air conditioning still cycled through the vents like it was waiting for someone to notice it working. Overhead, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, too dull to feel awake under, too loud to ignore. I was the only one left. I didn't mind. Not really. I'd stayed late 100 times, some nights to finish proposals, some nights to fix the numbers Liam botched, even before anyone knew his name. But this night was different, not in what happened, but in how it settled under my skin, like the wrong key in the right lock. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. A kind of shift, quiet and unwanted. I set down my pen and leaned back in the chair, my chair, the leather worn in just enough to fit the curve of my back like it was made for me. I reached up and adjusted the small plaque on my desk. Mara Ellison, Senior Accounts Manager. It tilted slightly to the left. It always did. Every time I straightened it, it would find its way back, like even the objects here preferred just a little imbalance. Through the glass wall of my office, the hallway lights were dimmed, casting reflections of empty desks and shut doors. My name was the only one lit up. I used to take comfort in that, being the last one out. Proof of commitment. Proof that I was the spine holding the place up. I clicked off my monitor and reached for my coat, then hesitated. There was a report due tomorrow, something Liam was supposed to finalize, but I knew what would happen. He'd pass it to me in the morning, rushed, half done, full of apologies wrapped in charm, and I'd fix it. Because Carlisle would be watching, and Carlisle liked when things stayed smooth. I sat back down and opened the file. Somewhere between reformatting the budget lines and correcting the client names, I thought about something Carlisle had said 2 months ago. "You've got a steadiness about you, Mara. That's rare. Don't think I haven't noticed." I had smiled then. But now, hours later, adjusting someone else's mistakes in an office I practically lived in, it landed differently. Steadiness had started to sound like stillness, like a compliment meant to keep me exactly where I was. I finished the report in under an hour. Before I left, I placed it in Liam's inbox. I didn't sign my name. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Shoulders slightly hunched, collar crooked, hair pinned too neatly. I looked like someone dependable, someone permanent. The doors closed, and for the first time in 10 years, I wondered what it would feel like to let go. It was a Wednesday when Carlisle brought him in. No formal introduction, just a passing nod in the hallway as I was walking out of the conference room, arms full of binders. Carlisle called out, "Mara, meet Liam, my sister's son. He's shadowing me for a bit." Liam extended a hand with a kind of ease that only comes from being sure of your welcome. He had the confident slouch of someone who'd never stayed past 6 p.m., and a grin that made you feel like you'd already agreed to something. I shifted the binders in my arms and shook his hand. His grip was light. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Pleasure's mine," he said, already half-turned toward Carlisle's office, as if I were just one item on a list of names he needed to shake hands with. Later that week, I noticed Liam sitting in on our strategy meeting. No explanation, no agenda, just a seat beside Carlisle, nodding along. He chimed in once, quoting a phrase I'd used in an earlier proposal, word for word. It sounded sharp coming from him. Fresher, maybe. People nodded. Carlisle glanced at me like it was something we'd share a private laugh about later. But there was no laugh, just a small, satisfied smile. That week, Liam started showing up at all the right places, morning huddles, client briefings, even the late Friday check-ins where we debriefed over cold coffee. Always beside Carlisle, always positioned just right. He had ideas, most of them stitched from old presentations and phrased like revelations. And Carlisle listened to them like he was hearing water for the first time. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a favor to family, a learning curve. Everyone needs a place to start. But the curve felt too short, and the slope felt tilted. By the following month, Liam had business cards. Liam Monroe, Strategic Development. I found one on the break room counter, beside the coffee pot I'd cleaned every Friday for 10 years. He hadn't asked me anything, not about my accounts, not about process, but he nodded a lot in meetings and always looked at Carlyle before he spoke, like a stage cue. What surprised me most wasn't how quickly he was rising. It was how smoothly the rest of the office absorbed him, the way people bent their sentences to include him, how Carlyle started finishing Liam's thoughts like they'd been speaking for years. "He's got a spark," Carlyle said to me once in passing, pouring cream into his coffee like it was an afterthought. "Like you did when you started." He didn't look up. He didn't need to. I smiled because that's what I'd been taught to do. But I walked back to my desk slower that day. I sat down and opened a spreadsheet I'd already finished. Not to edit it, just to look at it. The feeling had a shape now. Not anger, not jealousy, just the faint, tightening sense that I'd been moved to the edge of a frame I once centered. It happened in increments. The first time, it was a client meeting. I'd prepped the deck, tightened the numbers, aligned the language to match their tone. Understated, analytical, practical. Liam stood beside the screen like it was his idea of casual. When the client complimented the clarity of the proposal, Liam nodded and said, "We tried to think about what mattered most. Not I, we." I caught Carlyle's eye across the table. He didn't blink. He didn't correct him. Later in the hallway, Liam grinned and said, "That pitch landed nicely. Thanks for smoothing out the budget section. I always get tripped up there." "You could have said that in the room," I said gently. His smile flickered. Not away, just inward. Didn't seem like the moment for it. He clapped my shoulder like we were teammates. By the end of the month, "we" had become Liam's signature. "We feel strongly about this. We've had success using that approach." Sometimes the "we" meant me. Sometimes it meant Carlyle. Often, it meant neither. What made it worse was how effortlessly people played along. In one meeting, I watched Liam suggest a rollout calendar I'd created, one he'd originally argued against. He delivered it clean, charismatic, pausing at all the right places. People nodded. A junior associate wrote his exact phrasing on a legal pad like it might be quoted later. I sat across the table, hands folded, expression neutral. I could have said something, could have clarified, but that would have made it look personal. And I knew the rules here. Protect the optics, maintain composure, play for the long arc. Carlyle pulled me aside after that meeting. "You've always been great at building others up," he said. "That's a real gift, Mara. Not everyone has it." I looked at him then. Really looked. His tone wasn't unkind. He meant it as praise, the kind that keeps you useful but unseen. That night, I stayed late again. Liam's copy edits were sloppy. I cleaned them up in silence. When I left the building, my reflection in the elevator looked the same. But something inside me had shifted its weight, from hope to calculation. I was beginning to understand. They weren't careless. They were coordinated. It was the last Friday of the quarter. Carlyle called for an all-hands meeting, 4 p.m., just before the weekend lull. These were usually dry affairs, metrics, mild applause, a joke or two about industry trends. But that afternoon the air felt a little more pressed. People wore blazers. Someone brought in pastries. I stood in the back, arms crossed loosely, next to the coffee machine that sputtered every 12 minutes. Carlyle took the floor with his usual calm, papers in hand, more for theater than need. "We've had a strong quarter," he began, smiling in that slow, self-assured way of his. "A lot of moving parts, and I want to thank the team for keeping us aligned, sharp, forward-facing, especially during this period of," he glanced up, "generational transition." That was the first sign. I felt it in my gut before he said anything more. Carlyle cleared his throat, glanced around. "Which brings me to a piece of news I'm excited to share. Starting next month, Liam Monroe will step into the role of Director of Strategic Growth." The applause came too quickly, like people had been warned. Or worse, like they already knew. I didn't clap, not right away. I looked at Carlyle. He was still talking, but I couldn't hear him. Liam stood beside him, polished and poised, hands folded like a man rehearsed. He said a few humble words, gratitude, opportunity, legacy, then locked eyes with me as he stepped down. not a look of victory. Worse, a look of inclusion, like I'd been part of the plan all along. I clapped once, then again. Just enough. Afterward, people milled around, congratulating him. The word earned floated through the room like perfume. I moved toward the hallway, quiet and unbothered. On my way out, I heard someone say, "Mara must be proud." I reached the restroom and closed the stall door behind me. I didn't cry. I sat. My hands were steady, my breath even. But something behind my ribs curled in, a small, dense recoil. Not surprise, not pain, recognition. They had never prepared a place for me. They had used my labor to furnish his. When I finally stood and washed my hands, I looked in the mirror for a long time. Then I smiled, a small, clean smile, and walked out like nothing had changed. Because nothing had. The email arrived the next morning. Subject line, "Couldn't have done it without you." From Liam Monroe. Time, 7:18 a.m. He'd written it like a postcard. "Mara, I just wanted to say, yesterday meant a lot. I know I'm stepping into big shoes, and I'm grateful for everything you've built here. Your foundation is what made this opportunity possible. I hope to keep honoring it. Looking forward to collaborating more closely. In gratitude, Liam." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I clicked mark as read and closed my laptop. Around noon, Carlisle stopped by my office. No knock, just the door creaking open and his shadow filling the frame. "You doing okay?" he asked, as if I'd tripped on a curb instead of been publicly sidelined. "Of course," I said. He nodded. I figured. "You're solid, Mara. Always have been." He sat, uninvited. Looked around like it was the first time he'd noticed the space. "You've built something really dependable here. Quiet strength, you know? It's rare." There it was again. That word, quiet. Said like a compliment, but shaped like a muzzle. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "This doesn't change anything between us. He's got a kind of energy the board's looking for. That spark." "And I don't," I said, calmly. No bite, just fact. Carlisle didn't flinch. "It's not about that. You're invaluable, Mara. But every structure needs its pillars. You hold things steady. That's your power." He smiled like he'd given me something. Then he stood and added, "Let me know if there's anything you need." I nodded. "Will do." When the door closed behind him, I turned back to my screen and opened a blank document. Not to write a resignation letter. Not yet. Instead, I started listing client names, the ones who called me directly, the ones who skipped Liam's briefings, the ones who said things like, "You're the only one who really knows our history." As I typed, my mind stayed still. No fury, no panic, just a low, steady drumbeat of clarity. They hadn't chosen him over me. They'd never considered me at all. I started with the files, not the ones with logos and headers. The real ones, the buried notes from old calls, the custom workflows I'd tailored for each client without ever asking for credit. I copied them onto a drive, not out of spite, but preservation. They weren't the company's. Not really. They were mine. The parts no one had noticed being built because they weren't supposed to. I kept the list of names growing. Clients who requested me specifically, who forwarded my replies to others as templates, who once emailed me at 10:43 p.m. and got a response by 10:46. I didn't make calls. I didn't plant rumors. I just prepared. My lunches became walks, quiet loops around the block, just to feel the ground shift beneath me. Sometimes I imagined telling Carlisle I was leaving. I rehearsed it like a line I wasn't sure belonged in the script. At night, I stopped staying late, let the lights dim without me. One evening, I left exactly at 5 and walked to a little Italian place 2 neighborhoods over. The kind of spot no one from the firm would think to frequent. I chose a table by the window and waited. 10 minutes later, Ellen Harrow, one of our oldest clients, slipped into the seat across from me. She was already pulling off her gloves. "I had a feeling," she said, eyes sharp and amused. "When you asked for dinner, I knew something was either wrong or finally right." We didn't talk business, not directly. She asked how I was. I said I was thinking about doing things differently. "Good," she said without hesitation. You've been propping up that firm for years. Liam's the cardboard cutout they dragged to meetings. I didn't smile. I didn't have to. Before she left, she said, "If you go, let me know where. You have my number, not the office line." Afterward, I sat with the check in front of me for a while. It wasn't a plan, not yet. But it was weight shifting in my hand, something I could carry that belonged entirely to me. When I got home, I placed the drive beside my keys, a small, quiet object. But I slept like something had finally been set down. I wrote it the way I did everything, carefully, precisely, without waste. Dear Carlisle, after careful consideration, I've decided to resign from my position effective 2 weeks from today. This decision is one of clarity, not conflict. I'm grateful for the years of experience here, and I leave with quiet confidence in what comes next. Sincerely, Mara Ellison. No metaphors, no metaphoric knives, just a clean line across the page where our relationship ended. I printed the letter on the same paper we used for proposals, thick, ivory-weighted, understated. I didn't sign it until the second morning, after it sat on my desk, untouched. That day, I left it in Carlisle's office, center of his desk, weighted under a paperweight shaped like a sailboat. He'd once said it reminded him of direction. I wondered if he remembered that anymore. I didn't wait to be called in. I worked the rest of the day as usual, answered emails, attended a standing meeting. Liam stopped by my desk to ask if I'd seen his revised numbers. I nodded, said, "Looks fine," and let it sit there. At 4:50 p.m., Carlisle appeared in my doorway. "Got your letter," he said. I looked up. "I assumed you would." He stepped inside slowly, like the walls might change shape if he moved too quickly. "I didn't see this coming." "That's the thing," I said. "You did. You just never thought I would act on it." He exhaled, tried for a smile. "Mara, we can find a path forward here. We're just getting momentum. Let's talk options." I shook my head once. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." He paused. "This feels abrupt." "No," I said. "It feels silent because I never raised my voice." That landed. He looked at the floor, the wall, anywhere but me. "If it's about Liam." "It's not," I said. "It's about how easily you made space for him without ever offering me any." He looked like he wanted to explain, but there was nothing left to clarify. "I'll wrap up my accounts," I said, standing. No need for a send-off. He didn't stop me. I left his office with nothing in my hands, but something was gone from my shoulders, and I didn't notice how heavy it had been until it wasn't there anymore. The first message came 2 days after I walked out. Subject: "Where'd you go?" From Lisa, JulianaHalstonPartners.com. Time: 8:02 a.m. Mara, we just heard you're no longer with the firm. Honestly surprised. We've been reviewing our upcoming expansion plan. Any chance we could get your input wherever you are now? No pressure. Just miss your brain on our team. Warmly, Lisa. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied simply, "Happy to talk through it. Here's my number." That was the first. Then came a call from the CFO at Branwyn Holdings, an old contact I hadn't spoken to in months. "Someone mentioned you were exploring new opportunities," he said. "Is that a euphemism or an invitation?" They didn't ask about my plans. They didn't need a name for what I was building. They just wanted to follow. Not all of them, no. Some clients were too embedded, too loyal to brand over relationship. That was fine. I hadn't left to pull them all with me. Just the ones who already knew where the real work had come from. By the second week, I'd met with 5 clients. No pitch decks, no contracts. Just quiet lunches, thoughtful questions, and the ease that comes when trust is already in the room. The strangest part was how natural it felt. No corporate header. No Carlisle's signature at the bottom of my emails. Just my name. That was enough. In a coffee shop one afternoon, Ellen Harrow said something that stayed with me. "You never sold me anything, Mara. You just solved things before I had to ask. That's why I'm here." That night, I went home, opened a clean page, and wrote a header at the top, Ellison & Co., temp name. It was enough. For now, no office, no logo, just me, and the quiet knowledge that they had always known who held the weight. It came through casual channels. A message from Talia in HR, who'd always been kind in passing. FYI, 2 more on your old team just handed in notices. Liam's trying to juggle your accounts. Word is he's drowning a bit. Carlisle's, not thrilled. No glee in her tone. Just information, shared the way you might offer weather updates. A week later, a former junior associate emailed, "Things are messy. The transition wasn't a transition. It was a vacuum. You were the system, Mara. We just didn't see it while it was running." I didn't respond. It wasn't pride that kept me quiet. It was distance, a new kind of calm. The firm wasn't collapsing. Carlisle would steady it eventually, slap on structure where I'd once offered intuition. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I didn't refresh their website. I didn't ask who'd taken my office or whether Liam still used my templates. I didn't need to know. Instead, I focused on what was in front of me. The client meetings I'd scheduled without anyone else's approval, the branding designer I'd hired on a trial basis, the slow rhythm of building without bureaucracy. Some days I worked from a co-op space downtown. Other days, from the spare desk in my apartment, window cracked open, coffee beside my laptop. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't large. But every hour I spent was mine. The silence from Carlisle never broke. No follow-up call, no damage control, just a mutual, unspoken agreement. We would not revisit the story. And that, more than anything, felt like power. Because for the first time in a decade, no one controlled the narrative but me. The building looked smaller than I remembered. I hadn't meant to pass it, not deliberately. I was cutting through downtown to meet a client, one of the new ones, someone who'd never heard of Carlisle or Liam or the plaque that used to tilt left on my desk. But there it was. The old office. Same brushed steel signage. Same tinted windows reflecting a late autumn sky. I paused across the street. From here I couldn't see who had taken my place. But I could picture it. The desk rearranged. Maybe a newer chair. Liam's laugh from the conference room. Carlisle leaning in the doorway with another practiced smile. I didn't feel angry, not even nostalgic, just outside of it. That building had once been everything. The place I arrived early, stayed late, bled ideas without asking for credit. Now it was just part of the landscape. A set I'd stepped off of, quietly. I checked my watch, then kept walking. The cafe where I was meeting today's client had no etched glass doors, no receptionist. Just a corner table and 2 mugs already waiting. The client greeted me by name, first name, no title, and we got to work. Later that evening, back at my apartment, I passed my desk on the way to the kitchen. A small brass nameplate sat tucked beside the monitor. I'd found it in a drawer the day I left. Mara Ellison, Senior Accounts Manager. I hadn't thrown it out, but I hadn't displayed it either. I picked it up now, ran a finger along the edge. Then I opened a drawer and slid it in, gently. My new workspace had no door, no plaque, no hierarchy to carve my place in. And I didn't need one. Everything I'd built was portable now. Not because I carried it, but because it had always been mine.